part 2 of the most unhinged version of the mid-year freakout tag. I am doing these one video at a time, one question at a time in these videos, which I understand is not how these videos are traditionally done, but I wanted to sit down and film like all of it, and I kind of like started answering all of the questions in my head, and I just realized like it was just going to take so much time, and I thought, why not just do it in little snippets, little bits at a time. So that's my plan with this reading challenge. It's not a reading challenge. It is a booktube tag. So question 2 is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2025? And I, of course, can't just talk about one book. I hope to, at some point, make a list of like the top 10 books that I've read so far in 2025 or for the first half of the year. And hopefully that will come out by the end of July, but I make no promises around here. First book I'm going to mention is James by Percival Everett. I loved this book. So I read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in preparation for reading James, because I've never read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn before. And then I read James afterward, and I thought the conversation between those two books is really interesting. And James just has like a really different perspective on that story, and I really appreciated getting to see that. I recorded a reading vlog while I was reading James, and that will be up on my channel at some point. I make no promises of when. It's mostly edited. I just need to, finish editing it and upload it and all of those things. So, but yeah, I really appreciated my time and just like the thought-provoking things that book brought about. Next book I'm going to talk about is actually the only fantasy speculative fiction book on this list, and it's a romantasy at that. It is A Strange and Stubborn Endurance. I really like this book. So I read this book thanks to Mare from Lady Mare Reads. I would not have picked this book up otherwise, and Mare was talking about how it is a great romantasy book, even for people who like traditional fantasy or aren't like big into romantasy. And I am not big into romantasy, but I really like this one. And this one, I think part of the reason I like it, it's basically this like character's journey of healing. So how do I begin? We follow two perspectives, and our main character is in a kingdom that is like not accepting. He's like the third son of this king, and the king is just gonna like marry him off, and he's actually gay and he doesn't want to marry a princess. He wants all of this. It's a whole thing. And then he has like a secret boyfriend, and that relationship goes south fast in the very, very beginning of the book. And there is trigger warnings in the beginning of the book. This book, it does have on-page sexual violence, and it tells you that up front, but then the story is ultimately a journey of healing. So he gets to leave his kingdom and then finds himself in a world that is very different from one that he was in previously, and then he gets to, like rethink things in life and like how the way everything that he thought was normal growing up is not everyone's normal. So I don't know. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Next book on my list is a nonfiction. It is Our Prison's Obsolete by Angela Y. Davis. I read this. I did read this one this year, but I read it. Ooh. Which book did I read it? There was like a couple books I read that like kind of inspired me to read this. And one of them was like a fantasy book that I was reading, and like their solution, they caught a guy that was like basically just like a hired assassin, and then they like threw him in prison, and I was like, oh, that's not actually solving any of the problems at all. And even the person who like hired him can just like hire another one, and like this isn't also like solving the problem, but like why do people accept the job of being a hired assassin in the first place? And it just kind of, started me thinking on all of those things, which like, I guess I've been thinking about those things for a while, but it's just like all like coming about. And I was like, I think it's time, like I knew this book existed, but I never actually read it. And I was like, I think it's time to read it. And most of the book is talking a lot about like conditions and statistics and stuff like that. But some of them I knew, but some of them I wasn't as aware of, or I didn't know all of the stats and stuff. And then I thought the ending chapter was like a really good, I guess, just like cohesive argument. Of course, it's building on everything that it mentioned previously in the book, but then it's a cohesive argument of like how we can do things better. And how we can even like slowly progress towards a better future and the different things that we can work towards. And I thought it was a really good book. And in some ways, like it put into words things that I had rattling around in my brain and hadn't actually been able to put into words yet. And it also just like took the ideas I had further than I had taken them so far. So yeah, I really like that book. And then I read, I actually think I read this one before Our Prison's Obsolete. I read We Do Not Part by Han Kang, which is the Nobel Prize in Literature Award winner this past prize season, I guess. We Do Not Part is amazing. It is tragic. It is so many things. It is a difficult read, but it was good. Here's the thing, there's this one part in this book and it just sticks in my brain so much because there's so much symbolism in this book. There's so much that's just like, it's referring to one thing, but then it's like incorporating all of this like symbolism in it, and it is wonderful. How do I even describe this book? So it's following like two present day characters, but we also get like flashbacks to like a massacre that happened and then was silenced, and like no one was allowed to talk about it for a couple decades at least. I don't remember the specific timeline. And then our main characters today are living in a time where they are allowed to talk about it, but they're remembering like their family history growing up and things being whispered about because it wasn't allowed to be talked about publicly. And then they were talking about like maybe making a documentary memorial. They have like all of these stories they've gathered from this time, and one of her friends gets injured and goes to the hospital and then calls the other friend and says, hey, can you take care of my birds that are at my house? And then we literally like spent half of the book just like the journey from the hospital to the house, to the friend's house to take care of these birds. And there's like so many lines in there because like the friend is like, oh, the birds need water, by the end of the day. And then, the main character that's going on this journey and trying to get there in the snowstorm is going like, well, when is the end of the day for the bird? And when is the end of the day for humans? And it's a little bit existential, and I loved it. And there's this one moment, because there's a lot of things about like the water cycle. And there's this one moment where there's snow falling, and then the snow's falling on our main character. And then she goes, I wonder if this is like the same snow that was falling on these people that were massacred in the past. And I honestly, like whenever I read that, I was like, that is horrible. Why would you say such a thing? But then I was like, no, that is brilliant, because it feeds into the cycle of life, the water cycle, and then the we do not part theme of like, they are always still with us. And they're still with us in multiple ways in this story. And it's so much to think about, and I loved it. Okay. Another book that I read and loved is another nonfiction book. And this is Fair Play by Katie Barnes. And this is a nonfiction look. It's a look at the history of women's sports, the inclusion of trans women in sports, how that looks at different levels, how different stories in the media and stories that are not in the media, like how these things play out. And it's just kind of like a deep dive into like, is there unfair advantages? What makes a sport fair? And what makes a sport fair, am I saying that word? What makes a sport fair? Is examined like even before we get into the question of transgender athletes, of just like, because they go over the history of sports, and like some sports were more integrated and then have separate gender divisions, and then you know, even like the history of certain sports becoming separate gender divisions isn't always because like, oh, one gender has an advantage over the other. Some of it is literally just sexism. So this was a very interesting, and I thought like a very good, just like deep dive into all of those questions.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card.
Good night.
Each Apple product.
I didn't know my computer was playing something and it wasn't playing out loud, and then it, anyway. Those are the 5 books I wanted to mention as the best books I've read so far this year. I think I will talk about many more books in this tag that I also loved. So yes, I will be talking about more of them in the future. Let me know what are the best books you've read so far in 2025 in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video for the next question in this tag, which is like the best reread. So I will be answering that. And coming soon to a screen near you.